In this video, you're going to learn why your why is so important. Before you do anything, you have to know why you're doing it. That's everything from eating to shopping to sleeping to going on vacation and even to building a business. There's always a reason, a motivation why you do anything. Whether you're an online solopreneur who's just getting started or a seasoned one, you'll have a reason for everything that you do during the day. Maybe you haven't thought about it that much. It's time you did. My father was a technical writer for an engineering company. Although he never trained as an engineer, he had the mind of one, and his best buddies thought like he did. I can recall as a boy those occasions when he would come home with some joke or clever turn of phrase that you almost had to be an engineer to understand. One such saying comes to mind. It's this: we do not do what we do because of what we do. We do what we do because of the way we do what we do. To an engineer, that would have been funny. For the rest of us, it reveals a truth, one that may explain the reason that you've struggled to become the entrepreneur that you believe you are in your heart. According to Simon Sinek, author of the book Start With Why, this is the way most people think. They think about what they do and how they do it. What is what they do? The way they do what they do is how they do it. If you want to realize your entrepreneurial dreams, then you have to have both. But before you do that, you have to know why. In other words, you have to be able to say that we do not do what we do because of what we do or the way we do what we do. We do what we do because of why we do it. It starts with why. Why is why so important? Back in the 1960s, Victor Vroom, a psychologist and scholar, developed a theory about what motivates people. In a nutshell, he said that in order for you to achieve something, you had to believe that you were capable of doing it, and it had to have a sufficient reward as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't put forth the effort that was necessary to make it happen. In other words, your effort was contingent on the reward that you'd get from achieving whatever it was that you wanted to do. The reward was your why. In the 1990s, Andy Gilbert, founder of Go Mad Thinking, MAD, M-A-D, stood for Make a Difference. Andy Gilbert said something that was very similar. He said that if your why was big enough, then you could accomplish what you wanted to. To look at this another way, your why is your purpose. If your purpose, your mission for doing whatever it is that you want to do is big enough, if it's important enough to you, then you'll do whatever it takes to accomplish it. The opposite, however, is also true. If the reason that you embark on a particular path isn't enough to make you stay with it, then eventually you'll give it up. You won't even want to get out of bed. Why? Because you have no compelling reason to do so. So the question is, why is it that so few people fail to achieve success? Why have you failed to achieve your dreams? There may be a lot of reasons, but the thing is that there is a remarkable number of people who, despite the obstacles, somehow have managed to. And that means that it can't be for all the usual reasons that people give. It's not the economy or the exchange rate or the competition or the supply chain or even the employees. It's something else. You see, if it was any of those things, then you would have succeeded. That's because there are others who have faced the same things and still achieved what they set out to do. So we need to find out what the crucial difference is between you and them. When I was an undergraduate music student, I had a professor ask me a profound question. Of course, as an 18-year-old, I was too naive to appreciate it. Almost in passing, he asked me if there was anything else that I could do. At the time, I thought rather highly of my abilities in a lot of things, not just music, and I said as much. It was only many years later that I understood his question. He wasn't interested in my abilities. Instead, he wanted to know if I could live with myself if I didn't become a professional musician. You see, professional musicians don't pursue that career just because they like music. They're driven from inside. It makes them do whatever they have to in order to eat and have a roof over their heads and at the same time play music. It's probably why some of them live in a hovel but own a grand piano. To look at this another way, the reason they have to do what they do, is vastly more important to them than any reason you can think of why they shouldn't. The late actor Ian Carmichael said in his book that actors accept the roles they're offered, at least early on, because they're afraid that if they turn them down, no one will ever ask them again. And there are people who grew up in poverty and as a result were determined to escape it and never to experience it again. Others had one or more parents who were drug addicts or alcoholics, and many came from broken homes. The desire to escape an environment like that is a powerful motivator, a big why. Steve Siebold has studied the mindset of what he calls the world class. He contrasts them with what he calls the middle class. These are not socioeconomic groups. Instead, they're people who are separated simply by the way they think. When it comes to why and why not, there is a striking difference between the two. Those who are world-class thinkers are comfortable being uncomfortable. The masses, what he calls the middle-class thinkers, want to be comfortable more than anything else. What that means is that those who are average are willing to sacrifice success on the altar of comfort. They'd rather be comfortable than awesome. Whatever their why is, it's minuscule compared to being comfortable. And that's a problem for the affluent West because few people who are comfortable are willing to give it up, even for a short time, even if it means that they'll obtain something that is far greater. You may be surprised to learn that this is something that psychologists have known for years, and marketers use it to get you to buy their products. You, like most people, are more likely to do something to prevent loss than you are to obtain some gain. If marketers can make you feel as though you're losing out, then you'll buy from them in order to avoid it. Holding on to your comfort is the same thing as preventing loss. Giving up your comfort is perceived as a loss, and for most people, the thought of that loss makes the potential gain pale into insignificance. And so that means that if you have a big goal that you want to achieve, then you have to become a world-class thinker. You have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, as most entrepreneurs are. You'll find, however, that most people who have a job also have a lifestyle that they don't want to give up. They dream about having a successful business, but they aren't willing to stop being comfortable so that they can give it the effort that's needed to make it happen. How do you become comfortable with being uncomfortable? You have to reinterpret your perceived loss as a gain. Psychologists call this reframing. It's looking at the same thing from a different perspective. So how do you reinterpret potential loss? For one thing, you must recognize that in most cases the worst doesn't happen. It's been said, and attributions vary, that I've seen many troubles in my life, and most of them never happened. Pessimists can only see all that could go wrong, and the truth is that very little of it actually does. They're the ones who see that their glass is half empty, whereas if they reframed it, they'd see that it was really half full. The thing is that if you've never really been uncomfortable, then it's a little scary thinking about what that might look like. It's the fear of the unknown that you're dealing with. The way to reinterpret this, to reframe it, is by comparing it to the gain that you will get as a result, not what you have to give up in the process. And then once you do that, you need to think of some examples. Do you remember that at some time in the past you sacrificed time, money, and or energy to achieve something that was more important? Maybe in high school you gave up summer vacation to practice with a sports team. Or maybe you went out with your church to distribute Thanksgiving dinners or bags of groceries to poor people instead of sitting at home enjoying your meal and watching football games. Or maybe you're now in considerable debt because you decided to study for a degree. In each of those cases, it would have been easier and personally more comfortable to keep yourself to yourself. But if you did any of these or other things, where you sacrificed your time, money, or other resources, then perhaps without realizing it, you found a why that was big enough, that was important enough for you to temporarily become uncomfortable. What do these examples all have in common? In each case, the end result was more important to you than what you had to give up in order to obtain it. In other words, the why was greater than yourself. It was something that was bigger than you at the time. And that's the key. If you only focus on you, where you are right now, then you have to find a stronger internal drive, a motivator to get you going. And the strongest motivator I know of comes from a calling. Now, here's the thing, not everyone has a calling. Those who do just know in their hearts that there's something they have to do, and it doesn't matter how hard it is or how long it takes, they just do it. But not everyone has this. Sometimes a calling comes from adversity, such as a traumatic experience during childhood. I knew a guy when we were both undergraduates who wanted to be a doctor. As a child, he had suffered terrible burns on his arm when his mother had accidentally knocked a pan of boiling water off the stove and scalded him. The scar tissue was still evident all those years later. This guy became a surgeon at the University of Minnesota Medical School. I remember wishing that I had such a strong calling, though I didn't envy his scarring. If you're not familiar with Nick Vujicic, I hope I said that right, then you ought to be. He was born without arms or legs, but he has gone on to become a world-famous speaker and founder of an organization called Life Without Limbs. He's married and has 2 children. Some people are compelled to do what they do as a result of an experience that inspires them. They're so captivated by what they see, hear, or feel that they want it all the time. A good example of that is Leslie Garrett. She grew up in a musical family and as an adult became a celebrated opera singer. As a child, however, she had no ambitions at all to make music a career. In an interview, she said that the inspiration came when she heard someone else, someone with an operatic voice, sing. It was then that she decided that that's what she wanted to do. Some discover their calling when they realize that if a problem is going to be fixed, then they'll have to do it because no one else will. Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MADD, began that way. Cindy Leitner lost her daughter to a drunk driver in 1980. Her 2 other children had been injured earlier in separate accidents by drivers. One was drunk and the other was on tranquilizers. Days after her daughter was killed, Candy founded MADD. Today, the organization has a presence in every U.S. state and every Canadian province. It provides support to those who have lost loved ones, raises awareness of the problem of drunk driving, and promotes tough legislation to deal with those responsible. What makes you angry? What would you like to change that everyone else seems too busy or too comfortable to do anything about? That might be your calling. What if you don't have a calling or you haven't discovered it yet? Then you have to find a why that will drive you as if it did. And the way to do that is to embrace a project or a cause or a belief that is greater than yourself. Let's look at this from a different perspective. What is the problem with not having a why? You saw earlier that it's important to have one because it motivates you to put forth the effort to make it happen. But there's another reason, one that needs to be considered by itself. It's that if you don't have a reason for doing something, if you're not motivated to do it, then it also means that you don't have a reason for not doing something else. This problem is especially true if you're interested in everything. I've had people tell me that they have such wide interests that they don't want to give up anything. And I understand because I used to be like that too. For some, one lifetime isn't long enough to pursue all the things that interest them. Maybe this is true of you. Let me give you a personal example. One time, I made a list of all the things I wanted to do. I don't remember what was on it, only that it contained about 25 things, each of which could be a career all by itself. Now, we live at a time where our working lives consist of many, many careers, but each of the things on my list could have filled a lifetime by themselves. I remember struggling to get them down to just 8 things. 8 things. With 8 things on the list and feeling somewhat ashamed that I wouldn't be able to work on the other 17, I decided to spend an hour on each one every day. After about 3 days, I realized that I wasn't going to accomplish any of them if I didn't narrow it down to 1 or 2. And it still took a very long time to decide what those 1 or 2 would be. Now, you could use this as an example of the need to focus on one thing, but it could also explain what may be holding you back. That's because it's such a powerful illustration of what can happen if you don't have a strong reason to do any of them. You see, if you're not compelled to do just one, then all of them are options. Let me say that another way. If everything is possible, or if everything is of equal importance, then it doesn't matter which one you do. And so what happens is that you do whatever seems interesting at the time. There's nothing, except perhaps a little guilt, that compels you to do one thing instead of something else. And when that happens, it's impossible to stay with one thing long enough to make a difference. If you don't have a good enough reason to devote your energies to one thing, then it will be easy for you to flit from one thing to another. What does that look like in practice? Well, you just go in circles. You go from one thing to the next and to the next and then back again. If you find yourself distracted by email, for example, then the reason is that your why isn't compelling. If it was, then you would have no problem ignoring it. If your why was the motivating force that you claimed it was, then you wouldn't even think about your inbox or social media or what the latest BSO was until after you finished your work. That's because deep in your heart, you'd be absolutely persuaded that none of those things would help you to bring to fruition the thing that mattered most, to put forth the effort to succeed. You can justify your behavior all day long about why you constantly check your inbox, spend hours in social media, or keep buying new products because you want to see what they're about. But if none of those things will get you closer to your goal, and that means that they are an indispensable step on the path, then the reason is that your goal isn't that important. Instead, it's no more significant than the emails that you read or the memes that you share or anything else that distracts you from what you need to do. Think about that. You need to have a reason for doing what you're doing that's so compelling that it makes everything else insignificant to you. Are you doing this for your family so that you can spend more time with them? Then recognize that when you spend your time reading emails, for instance, that unless they're business related, they don't get you closer to your goal. And so that means that you're taking time away from your family. In other words, you're losing time with them when you spend it on things that don't matter. You must learn to think like that. Maybe the reason you're pursuing a particular goal is so that you'll have more personal freedom. That's why many people start online businesses. They want to be location independent, which is another way of saying that they want to work from home or for someplace else in the world. If that's your reason, then you must persuade yourself that every minute you spend doing something which doesn't get you closer to that objective is taking at least that much time away from it. In other words, you're losing your freedom whenever you check your email, spend hours on social media, or do anything else that distracts you from the activities that will ultimately give you that freedom. And when you think about it like that, then it reveals a truth that you may not want to face. It's that you'd rather remain enslaved to the things that don't matter than work toward the things that do. There's something else that might hold you back. It's that you're not sure of success. So instead of putting all your effort into the task, you hold a little in reserve, just in case. You may be among those who want to know how it will turn out before you take the first step. In fact, you'd like to know what all the steps are before you do anything. The result, however, is that you drift. You look at everything because you think that somewhere there's a golden map, a treasure map of sorts that will tell you all that you want to know. In The Last Crusade, Indiana Jones finds himself standing on the edge of a chasm. The bad guys aren't too far behind. Not knowing what to do, he steps over the edge in faith and puts his foot onto a stone bridge that until then was invisible. At that point, he scatters some dirt across it, and it's revealed. He would never have found the bridge had he not stepped out in faith. If you're going to achieve your biggest goals, then you have to step out in faith. You're going to have to do what you know right now and believe that what you need to do after that will become apparent when you need to do it. But as you can't do it now anyway, you must tell yourself that not knowing doesn't matter. The thing is that you'll never know everything, and if you wait until you do, then you'll die waiting, because it'll never happen. No one knows everything. It's critical that you understand this. There are so many people who do nothing because they're afraid it won't work out. And the thing is, it'll never work out if you don't take that first step. Mark Batterson, best-selling author of The Circle Maker, says that most of us don't know where we're going most of the time. If you're waiting for absolute clarity, then rest assured that you won't live long enough to see it. You only need to do what you know. It's vital to the success of anything you want to do to have a compelling reason for doing it. That reason can be thought of as your purpose, your why. When the reason that you want to do something is more important than anything else, then it will give you the needed motivation to keep going, to avoid doing those things that keep you from it. It will enable you to discern between what you should do and what you should not do, what to keep and what to give up. If your why is big enough, if it's important enough, then you will have no problem saying nope to things that will keep you from reaching your goal. People who want to lose weight will desire that more than cake or cookies that are available. Those who are saving for a down payment on a house won't buy a new car. Instead, they'll get by on an older one because they can pay cash for it. And those who want to have a successful business will spend time building it instead of watching a lot of TV, spending hours on social media, or being distracted by anything else. The choices you make will prove to you and everyone else what really motivates you. Now, it's up to you. If you found this video helpful, then be sure to subscribe to this channel and watch What's Your One Thing? That video will help you to get started.